Okay, I'm going to read something to you. This is a dialogue between Jesus and the Jews. This is John chapter 8, 54 and 55. They were talking about, Jesus was talking about, he was talking about receiving honor from the Father, and they were saying, "Are you greater than Abraham?" And in verse 54, Jesus replied, "If I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. My Father, whom you claim as your God, is the one who glorifies me. Though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I did not, I would be a liar like you, but I do know him and obey his word." I share that with you tonight. Our vision statement here as a church of discipleship starts with knowing God. Okay? That's what discipleship, that's what our vision starts with, is knowing God. And in order to know God, you need to know what he loves, what he hates. Need to know what he wants. You need to know the heart and mind of God. You see, here's the reality, and here's where the Jews were that Jesus was talking to. You can engage in religious activity. Said another way, you can go to church all the time. You can come up with moral rules, moral standards to live by. But if you don't know him, you don't know how to love him or glorify him. That's why it all begins with knowing him. And that's why it was such a kind of a tragic circumstance that Jesus was identifying here with these Jewish leaders to say to them, you don't know him. I mean, think about, people who were very self-confident that they were righteous people. Very self-confident that they were righteous people. So much so that they made kind of a habit of demeaning people who they thought were not righteous. And Jesus says to them, you don't know God. What do you think the reaction to that would be?
You're self-righteous and somebody tells that to you, you're gonna be offended.
Right.
Defensive.
And they were. And what we're going to see tonight, it'll take us a little bit to get to Jeremiah's book precisely, but we're going to be talking about scriptures that refer to the importance of knowing God and how idolatry got in the way of knowing God. And then what Jeremiah revealed about knowing God and why they didn't know God and the implications of that. So let's jump in and start with the covenant between Israel and God. Exodus chapter 20, verses 4 through 6. Somebody read those verses for us, please.
You shall. Go ahead.
I like it. See if you can stay together.
You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water below. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, responding to the transgression of fathers by dealing with children to the third and fourth generations of those who reject me, and showing covenant faithfulness to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you a thought question before we get into the question written here. Why didn't God just say, I want you to know me? And just leave it at that. Why did he have to go into this? I don't want you to make any kind of images that look like birds in the sky or fish in the sea, or why do you have to say that? Why didn't you just say, I want you to know me? This is a lesson about human nature. Why didn't he just say, you need to know me?
I think they probably would ask questions and things. He was trying to answer them before they asked them.
Okay, so maybe some of this was anticipatory to be preventive. I don't want to have to deal with all your questions, so let me just
Explain
address
it
it.
a little
in the
more.
beginning. Okay, other ideas?
Because if I'm allowed to construct my own image of God, I'll fall in love with that. And not him.
They were so far off the beaten path or the proven path that he went above and beyond than just saying, love me, because they were so far off the path.
Some of this was, they'd already been exposed to, they were already engaging in. He had to address the fact that they were already removed from it.
Like you said, also about human nature. I mean, there are some people that you don't want them to do something. But if you're not detailed on what you want them not to do, they will do it. Or some people that until you say no specifically, they take every other answer as yes.
You're spot on. When I was in college, we went on this was quite a field trip. We went for a week-long trip to Washington, DC. It was for three hours of credit. Then we got to go to Washington, DC, and we met with someone in the administration at the time. And we were talking about taxes. And I just, as an accounting major, I asked the question, why don't we just have a flat tax? Okay, just a flat tax. Everybody has a flat tax, you pay, and that takes care of all these regulations and stuff that you all have to come up with. And you know what he said? He said that wouldn't keep people from looking for loopholes. People are always looking for loopholes. That's kind of what you were saying, Francisco. And so God has to go back again and again and say, okay, not only do I have to say, come to know me, I have to say no to this and no to that, because the human tendency is to look for loopholes. All right, so yeah, go ahead, Peter.
I think we have to remind ourselves regularly that the people of Israel came out of 400 years of idolatry. And they were Egyptians in everything else except their actual, who they were born to. But these people didn't have any depth. They wandered. And so, the idea of a graven image, it makes it even tougher to go back to just talk about a spiritual God who is not a thing God. So I try not to be too hard on them, because they have wandered and wandered and wandered, and that was all part of God's plan. But they're not even babies at this point when we're reading this in Exodus 20.
Yeah, and my referencing them is not so much to be hard on them, but to see ourselves in them and learn from their mistakes. And that's what I'm hoping we can do. The 10 Commandments include a prohibition against forming an idol to represent anything. God created us with a God spot, a natural inclination or need to seek one who is greater than us. If you know anything about 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about this greater being, a higher power. We kind of have that, we're kind of created that way. So with what do people try to fill their God spots, and why would there be a prohibition against creating something visible and tangible? What do people try to fill with their God spot? Food. Food sometimes.
Prosperity.
Prosperity.
Relationships.
Relationships.
Education.
Education.
Intelligence.
Not relying on God. Not trusting in him. That's what he wanted.
Which is so ironic.
Yeah.
The thing that you need to be doing is the thing you're resisting doing.
You rely on your family, the people that you trust the most. And if they do not recollect or understand what was prophesied 50 years before them, and it doesn't trickle down to you, you look for whatever you want.
And so what you're highlighting is that a lot of times people do this out of ignorance. They don't know any better. And that certainly would probably apply to the Jewish, to the Israelites here. A couple more possibilities. People try to fill their God spot by worshiping celebrities, whether they be entertainers or athletes or actors. They try to fill their God spot by using social media to promote themselves. They try to fill their God spot by pursuing youth so that they never grow old. Why would there be a prohibition against creating something visible and tangible? Why couldn't we make something and say, this is just a representative of God? Why couldn't we do that? Why didn't he want the Israelites to do that? It's not Baal. It's not Molech. It's not Asherah. This is Yahweh's representation. Why wouldn't that be okay?
It's limiting.
What do you mean limiting?
It does not fully represent who God is, which is limitless and eternal. And it is in the mind of a human being that it comes out of the mind of a human being, out of his creation. And it so limits who he is and
All right.
what he can do, what he should be to us.
All right, so by limiting him, we are diminishing him in a way. So don't want to do that because it diminishes him when we limit him. Why else would there be a prohibition?
You would make him equal to Baal and whoever else.
All right, puts him on equal level with he's just one of many options that you've got out there, rather than the option. Any other ideas?
I have a question more than I have an idea.
Yeah.
But you look at like the Ark of the Covenant, and he dwelled there and was passed through, and you had people constantly trying to take it and pass it here and pass it here, and it wasn't treated correctly. Even in the instance of the Ark, my question, I guess, is, it's interesting because that was a huge representation and he dwelt there, but it's very different than what an idol was. He had certain things that was in the Holy of Holies. Just curious of your thoughts.
Well, just you have to have a bigger perspective about the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle had a front area, the holy place. And the priests went in there and there was the table of showbread and the light and so forth. And outside there was the cleansing pool and so forth. In the Holy of Holies, which was a second room, There's only one, the high priest went there only one time. You didn't have regular access to that. He was in fact, if everything was carried out properly, no one except the high priest would ever have that experience. So it maintained the mystery of God. It maintained the idea of his spiritual nature rather than his physical nature. Have I even started to answer your question yet?
I don't even know.
I don't even remember what the question was.
No,
So
you're
it's-
not. It just, the thing that comes to my mind is that, it says no one should even touch the ark, and the fellow who's, because it was not even being carried correctly, and I think that was definitely the reason that I was struck, down, because it was we don't even know what happened necessarily to the ark. It's just something that just popped into my mind. I don't know that it's just interesting that at that one point that and I know about the temple, I know about the rooms and all the things and the special, ceremonies and things. It's just interesting that in that particular instance, he was in this, or his spirit was here, and it just was interesting. I don't think I have a question.
Yeah, and his presence was meant to dwell between the cherubim.
Correct.
And so, yeah, thank you for not actually asking a question.
Sorry.
Because I don't think I answered it anyway, so it worked out good. You didn't ask a question, I didn't get an answer, so that was
That's all
good,
right.
that was good. Here's the bottom line. Anytime you create an object, the tendency is for it to become impersonal. I don't know, maybe I'm just weird, but I don't have a relationship with our washing machine. I don't. Okay? I don't sit and sing or read sonnets to it or anything like that. It's just a thing, all right? When you have an object, it's just a thing. God didn't want to be just a thing. He wants a relationship. And you can't have a relationship with an object. He wants to be one we have a real relationship with a being. Okay? And so there's nothing that can represent him adequately. As Cherie said, it limits him, it diminishes him. So he didn't want anything made. Now, Exodus 33.
When you think about it, Jesus did not have a lot of personal face-to-face times to be with people. In other words, it was a spiritual Jesus that everybody was really interested in. And that's the reason we're not told anything about what he looked like or his stature or none of those things. And that's the reason he didn't stay here for 300 years. He came in those 50 days and he had all the three times or the 3 years of his ministry. And then it's this hard to grasp, being in the presence of God and wanting him to be in that way in my life. And that takes that out of the idol deal and keeps me from doing that.
Yeah, and that makes it harder for some people. They think, I can't see him, I want to see him. Well, we think that that's a necessary ingredient to faith. It's not. The key is, and we're going to see this as we go through, is seeking him. He is more than adequate to reveal himself to us if we will seek him. Again, objects actually get in the way of that. All right. Israelites didn't understand that. Some people today have a hard time understanding that, but that's the reality. Moses, as great a leader, was one of those who struggled with that because he's going to ask for that. So somebody read Exodus 33, 12 through 23.
Moses,
Very good. All right, excellent.
Moses said to the Lord, you have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways, so I may know and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people. The Lord replied, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. Then Moses said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do you not send up from here? How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all other people on the face of the earth? And the Lord said to Moses, I will do the very thing that you have asked, because I am pleased with you and I know you by name. Then Moses said, now show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all the goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim your name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have the mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Then the Lord said, there is a place near me where you may stand on the rock when my glory passes by, and I will put you in the cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I'll remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen.
Okay, Moses had a face-to-face relationship with God. At the burning bush, God appeared to him, revealed himself, spoke to him directly. And when I say face-to-face, I'm talking about a direct conversation. He had regular direct conversations with God. Moses said, that's not enough. I want more. God said, okay, I'm going to give you more. I'm going to tuck you in the cleft of the rock and I'm going to walk by. I'm not going to let you see my face, but I'm going to reveal more of my glory to you. Now, I said that even though he's not visible, that visible things will get in the way of actually knowing him. And the key is to seek after him, because Moses will not get to see his face. There's a difference, as we're about to read, there's a difference between seeking God and seeking answers. So let's read this quote from Francis Frangipane. He wrote, there is a difference between seeking answers and seeking the Lord. There's a difference between secondhand book knowledge and a firsthand encounter with the living one. God must become as real, as full, and as all-consuming to us as the world was when we were sinners. Though he was chosen to lead God's people and had personal conversations with God, Moses wanted to know Yahweh more personally. What does it mean to know God? Again, notice what God did when he was revealing himself. The first thing he did is he shields his eyes. So here's the first thing we learn about knowing God. It's not based on sight. It's not based on sight. What does God say about himself as he passes by? You remember? We didn't read that part, but it's recorded in the next few verses. God talks about himself as being compassionate and gracious, slow to anger. This is chapter 34, abounding in love and faithfulness. To know God is to know his nature, to know his heart. not just his attributes. And by attributes, I'm talking about being all-knowing, all-seeing, all-present. Okay, those are impressive. But knowing God, as he's revealing himself to Moses, has to do with God's telling you, I want you to know what my nature is like. And my nature is that by nature, I'm compassionate. By nature, I am slow to anger. And so he's revealing his heart. By nature, I'm abounding in love and faithfulness. And so you do that, you come to know his heart and his nature by spending time with him and experiencing firsthand the wonder of who he is. And I want to remind you this, I talked a lot about this early on in the class, and even when we were talking about the Grace of God class before. We only know God because of what he reveals to us. And when we start shaping things and making things, we've now distorted who he is. He didn't reveal that about himself. Those are not true represent. Whatever it is we make. I mean, we make this beautiful angelic being, create this beauty. That's not who he is. It distracts from knowing his heart and his mind and his character. Okay? So it's not by sight that we come to know God. It is by knowing his heart. Somebody read Jeremiah 2, 29 through 32.
Up to you.
Why do you bring charges against me? You have all rebelled against me, declares the Lord. In vain I punish your people. They did not respond to correction. Your sword has devoured your prophets like a ravenous lion. You of this generation, consider the word of the Lord. Have I been a desert to Israel or a land of great darkness? Why do my people say, we are free to roam? We will come to you no more. Does a young woman forget her jewelry, a bride her wedding ornaments? Yet my people have forgotten me, days without number.
It's almost humorous how people blame God for the choices we make. They had forgotten God. What do these verses reveal about the general attitude that led them to forgetting God? There are four things I came up with. What do you see as a general attitude that led them to forgetting God?
They're free.
Okay. They have this independent spirit. I'm not keeping God's covenant because I'm free to roam. I'm a free agent. I don't have to be committed to God. I'm a free agent. So that attitude contributed to them forgetting God. What else do you see?
They don't respond to correction.
Okay. They didn't take responsibility. They blamed God, which again led to them forgetting God. What else do you see?
He compared it to, significant periods or events in somebody's life. And they didn't even, think of him when they did not even think about what they should have done when they were getting married or, things of that nature.
So they didn't make pursuing him intentional. Okay. It was never an intentional pursuit in their lives. He wasn't first in their lives, so why would they make it intentional? So instead of responding to warning and correction, they chose to kill the prophets that were sent to them, which again, when you kill the messengers who are telling you about this being, you're apt to forget. And so that's where they are. Jeremiah 10, 1 through 5.
Hear what the Lord says to you, people of Israel. This is what the Lord says. Do not learn the ways of the nations, or be terrified by the signs in the heavens. Though the nations are terrified by them, for the practices of the people are worthless. They cut a tree out of the forest, and a craftsman shapes it with his chisel. They adorn it with silver and gold. They fasten it with a hammer and nails, so that it will not totter. Like a scarecrow in the cucumber field, their idols cannot speak. They must be carried because they cannot walk. Do not fear them. They will do no harm, nor can they do any good.
Here Yahweh exposes the reality about idols. What absurdities did he point out? What's absurd about idols?
They're not real.
We're worshiping something that you made.
That's not much of a God, is it? If I have to make it, it's not much of a God.
You know, one thing that we can observe is something that we have to look at that keeps us from looking up.
Okay, so if I'm having to look, at this object here, I can't look upward, can't seek after the real thing. They may look impressive, but they have to be carried everywhere. They can't speak, can't walk, can't do anything. That is a representation of the power that people were trying to access. And as we talked about in a previous class session here about idolatry, you can understand why this would be so offensive and frustrating to God. These powerless creations, people were trading him for these powerless creations. Jeremiah 44, 15 through 19.
However, all the men who knew that their wives were burning incense to other gods, all the women standing by, a great assembly, and all the people who were living in the land of Egypt at Pathros answered Jeremiah, as for the word you spoke to us in the name of Yahweh, we are not going to listen to you. Instead, we will do everything we said we would, burn incense to the Queen of Heaven and offer drink offerings to her, just as we, our fathers, our kings, and our officials did in Judah's cities and in Jerusalem's streets. Then we had enough food and good things and saw no disaster. But from the time we ceased to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven and to offer her drink offerings, we have lacked everything. And through sword and famine, we have met our end.
19.
And the women said, when we burned incense to the Queen of Heaven and poured out drink offerings to her, was it apart from our husband's knowledge that we made sacrificial cakes in her image and poured out drink offerings to her?
Okay, do you see the defiance? Verse 16, I mean, they're telling, they're kind of in Jeremiah's face. We're not going to listen to the message you've spoken to us in the name of the Lord. Ishtar, AKA the Queen of Heaven, was the goddess of fertility until King Josiah's reforms. She was worshipped in an effort to overcome food shortages. Despite the absurdities of idolatry, what does this passage reveal about the attraction of idols? What made them attractive? Why did the people say, "I'm not listening to you, Jeremiah. We're going to keep worshiping the Queen of Heaven"?
Like it's not broke and fix it.
Kind of what wasn't broke. What did they see? What did they perceive as a cause effect?
All their actions and offerings toward that idol,
We're producing what?
what they wanted to.
And
The
So
crops,
they have
yeah.
plenty of
no
food.
disaster.
We haven't had a famine since we worshiped the Queen of Heaven. We haven't had wars since we started worshiping the Queen of Heaven. We're having good crops. We're having children. Everything's working good since we've been worshiping the Queen of Heaven. People had this idea that that was the cause of all the good that was happening to them. What else was attractive about the idols?
These kind of idols don't expect anything.
Okay? Kind of live any way we want, as long as we bring our drink offerings and we burn incense to Ishtar, we have plenty of food. So let's worship Ishtar. You know, it's possible to treat Yahweh that way too. Send up a prayer to win a game. Make a promise to God to straighten out your life, that you'll straighten out your life if He heals someone that you love. Attend church long enough to win the girl. What I'm saying in all of this is idolatry is pretty selfish stuff. And that's the ultimate God that we're elevating in idolatry, is self. Okay? Yeah.
Do you know who this Pathros is in the land of Egypt? I never know. this.
I do not.
I don't know it either,
I do not.
but it was in the land of Egypt. So they were wanting to put a foot in each spot to kind of cover their bases. It looks to me like what they were trying to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, we're years removed from Egyptian slavery, but that had lingered. Jeremiah 9, 1-3, and then 23 and 24.
Oh, that my head were a spring of water and my eyes a fountain of tears. I would weep day and night for the slain of my people. Oh, that I had in the desert a lodging place for travelers, so that I might leave my people and go away from them. For they are all adulterers, a crowd of unfaithful people. They make ready their tongue like a bow to shoot lies. It is not by truth that they triumph in the land. They go from one sin to another. They do not acknowledge me, declares the Lord.
I think there are some translations that even say in verse 3, they do not know me. 23 and 24.
This is what the Lord says. Let not the wise boast of their wisdom, or the strong boast of their strength, or the rich boast of their riches. But let the one who boast about this, that they have the understanding to know me, that I am the Lord who exercises kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. For in these I delight, declares the Lord.
So as we go through life, if you want to know something that's boast worthy, it is to be able to say, I may not be rich. I may not have a 40-inch vertical jump anymore or ever.
A lot of money.
But I know the Lord. Okay, here's the question. It grieved God that his people did not know him. He wanted them to boast not in their wisdom, strength, or riches, but that they know him. What are some false or insufficient paths to knowing God? God says, I want you to know me. What are some paths people may try that really don't ultimately lead to knowing him?
I want to be happy all the time.
All right, if I think that knowing God is about pursuing my own personal happiness, I'm deceiving myself. Okay, and yet some people equate that together, that my own personal happiness is the essence of knowing God. What else?
Attending all the services.
All right, so if I'm at every service, that means I know God. And as I said earlier, you can engage in all kinds of religious activity and still not know God. The Pharisees were evidence of that. How about these? Reason alone. I know all the facts, and quote you scripture. I can, ask me a question about Jesus. I can win trivial pursuit about Jesus. That doesn't mean you know him. Okay? Just because you know he was born in Bethlehem, just because you know that at the age of 12 he stayed behind it, facts don't necessarily mean you know him. Experience. Feelings often reveal more about us than about him. Okay. Sunday was marvelous assembly. I wept during it. Okay. I was frustrated with myself because I loved the singing so much and I wanted to be able to sing, but I kept having to wipe my face with tears. But that didn't mean I knew God, because I felt something. Now, hopefully we do feel something. But feeling alone doesn't mean that you know him. Religion for religion's sake. If I go through the rituals, but I don't have any heart or relationship, that doesn't mean I know God. And as we've talked about in previous weeks in Jeremiah, the Israelites were engaged in religious activities. It's not like they had completely wiped God off of their radar. They were engaged in religious activities, but they didn't know him. Psalm 19 verse 2 and Romans 10 and verse 2 talk about it not being good to have a zeal without knowledge. And so if we're really going to know God, there has to be both zeal and knowledge.
Spirit and truth.
Spirit and truth. To use Jesus' words in John chapter 4. He's looking for worshipers who worship him in spirit and in truth. That's what Jesus said in John 4:24. So here's question number 7. Let's turn to Jeremiah 22 and begin to tie things up tonight. Jeremiah 22, 15 through 17.
Does it make you a king to have more and more cedar? Did not your father have food and drink? He did what was right and just. So all went well with him. He defended the cause of the poor and needy, and so all went well. Is that not what it means to know me, declares the Lord? But your eyes and your heart are set only on dishonest gain, on shielding innocent blood, and on oppression and extortion.
This is a message to good King Josiah's son, Shallum or Jehoahaz, who was not a good king. All right. And he's calling back. Don't you remember what life was like for your dad? Don't you remember what it was like for him when he was king? And so here's the question. In this passage, God was speaking to Shallum or Jehoahaz, son of Josiah. Unlike Josiah, he was evil. Based on this passage, what does it mean to know God?
to do what is right and just, and defend the cause of the poor and needy.
All right, part of it includes doing what was right and just and defending the cause of the poor and needy. In other words, it's to have God's heart, and God's heart is a heart of justice. It is a heart of compassion. Isn't that what God told Moses when he was going by in Genesis 34 or Exodus 34? That's the heart of God. So knowing God is not about information or feelings or rituals or traditions. It's about having such a close relationship with him that you know his thoughts in his heart, the things that he loves, the things that he hates, and you live that out in your own life. And it's an ongoing process. That's why being godly, that's why being around godly people, that's why what we're doing tonight, that's why studying scripture and prayer and fasting and all kinds of spiritual disciplines, those are not the end. Those are the means to the end of knowing God. Okay? I think that's why Jesus in Matthew chapter 6, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said about fasting. Fasting is not meant to be done so you can go around and people can look at you and you say, hey, look, I fasted today. Can you see it? I didn't shave. I'm kind of disheveled a little bit. Did I impress you? Aren't you impressed by, hey, I fasted today. Do you not see that? That's not the end. And that's the way people were treating it. It was a way to get attention. It was a way to get accolades. Fasting was meant to help people know God. Bible study. I'll let you read your Bible today. If I go around the room, that'd be good. I read 16 chapters.
In Genesis or in?
The longest ones. Aren't you impressed? That's not why you do it. You do it in order to know God. Spent 26 hours today on my knees praying. Just a little embellishment. It's not to impress people. It's not to impress yourself. You know? Good job, Dale. Way to go. You really are good. It's to know him. We gathered tonight. Hey, it snowed yesterday. I was here Wednesday night. I fought yesterday's snow to get here. That's not what it's about. I hope that by being together tonight, you know God better. And that from knowing him better, you'll love him more and you'll want to glorify him. Because he deserves it. Okay? Have a very blessed week.
Oh, I was just gonna say.